What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts. My name is Kyle Dabra.
What's going on, you guys? Kevin Valentin here. Kyle, week one is just about in the books. How you
Yes,
feeling?
sir. Yes, sir. I'm feeling good. Um, had a long day at work, but got a decent workout at the gym done. Now we just get to sit down, recap week one. Obviously, we got that Jets and 49ers game just about to wrap up. You guys will know the result by the time that we post this in the morning. But no, just like give me your quick thoughts about week one now that football's back in full swing.
I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, it's glorious to sit back and watch. I thankfully had this Sunday off, so I was really able to just enjoy myself. I actually went to a local bar downtown to where one of my good friends is opening up a kitchen there for Sundays. So it was good vibes, good people. I actually met a couple Colts fans at the bar, so it was kind of cool. But obviously, the end result was not good for me, nor was it in fantasy. But dude, just to look around at the bar and have a multitude of TVs and just see like every game on, I was just like, this has got to be what heaven feels like.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, on my end, I was at work, but I had NFL Red Zone on, so Scott Hansen was doing his thing. I think at this point he's been doing that for like 15, 16 years, and got right back into the swing of things. And I mean, honestly, like the slate of games that we had on Sunday were fantastic. I mean, obviously we'll get into a couple here. Um, I know we're probably going to talk about the Colts at first. I know that's probably going to be a sore spot for you based on the fact that they only lost by 2 points. But like I said, we'll talk about the Colts and Texans game. Obviously, the Texans uh, leave Indy with a 29-27 victory. After that, we will go into the Vikings Giants game, which was just an utter beatdown in MetLife Stadium on Sunday, where the Vikings won 28-6. I will say just before I continue into the next game, Sam Darnold started off fantastic in that game. I think he started off 12 for 12 as far as his passing accuracy went. He was just dialed in. And Aaron Jones going from Green Bay to Minnesota looks like he's fine, still carrying the boats. And even Justin Jefferson got a touch. So across the board, it looked like the Vikings are in a pretty good state of things, as I would say. Now that Kirk Cousins has gone down to Atlanta, didn't work out for him in Week 1, but we'll talk about that later. After that, we'll go into the rookie debut of Caleb Williams, the number one pick from this past year's draft. The Bears won 24-17. Granted, when it came to the Bears offense, not a lot of explosive plays. Looked like it was kind of an up and down day for that Bears offense, but they relied on their defense and special teams getting multiple touchdowns in their favor, and they ended up getting that Week 1 win by the score of 24-17. After that, we'll talk about the Bucks and the Commanders. This was pretty much dominated by the Bucks from beginning to end. Baker Mayfield looked absolutely fantastic throughout this game. Threw 4 touchdowns. Mike Evans got involved. Chris Godwin got involved. Jalen McMillan, who's a relatively young stud with them, also got his first career touchdown. I think his first career catch was a touchdown, if I remember correctly from that game. The Bucks roll 37-20 in that game. Obviously, we'll also mention Jaden Daniels. He's the rookie sensation with Washington this year. Truth be told, I think he had a better debut as a quarterback compared to Caleb Williams as far as the rookies are concerned, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. And then the last notable game that we'll cover will be the Sunday night game that took place between the Rams and the Lions. Very competitive game. This game went into overtime, but the Lions get the game-winning drive, really led by David Montgomery, where he flat out just ran over the Rams defense like it was just a walk in the park. The Lions start off the year 1-0 with a score of 26-20 over the Rams. And then after that, we'll do a weekly roundup of just the other games. We'll pretty much just mention each game with like a sentence or two from both of us. Um, After that, we'll round out the episode with a mention of James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones passed on this past Monday or yesterday when you guys hear this. Obviously, this is one of the greatest actors or one of the greatest like voice actors you'll ever hear on the silver screen. He passed away at the age of 93 years old. So, in memorial of him, I think it would be nice to just give him his respect on the life that he lived, and we'll round out the episode with that. But without further ado, let's transition into, like I said, the sore spot for Kev in this episode, and that's going to be the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts game. Like I mentioned, Houston leaves Indy with the 29-27 victory. CJ Stroud, pretty solid day, 24-32, 234 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, both of them going to Diggs. Joe Mixon had a great day on the ground with 30 carries, almost 160 yards on the ground with one touchdown as well. And then to kick it over to Indy, Anthony Richardson going into year two had some bright spots. There were some up and down moments with his accuracy, turning the ball over, but he had some great moments, especially that one bomb that he threw to Alex Pierce. It was like a 65 yard touchdown on that play in particular. And just speaking for me here, I was expecting the Texans to, win convincingly in this game, but Indy really showed that they can go toe to toe with a team like the Texans, who, just based off of the early season expectations, the Texans might be one of the best teams not only in the AFC but in the NFL. Granted, I know Kev will not take solace in moral victories, but there's definitely some potential seen with the Indianapolis Colts, and it's something that he mentioned last week when we discussed the Colts in general. So that's pretty much the setup, Kev. So to kick this one to you, just what were your takeaways from the Texans and Colts game, and where do you see both teams going from here now that we're past week one?
So, I mean, obviously, as your resident Colts fan, it was great to just have, the team back together. It was great to watch a divisional matchup. It was fantastic to see the fight had put out there. I was looking forward to the rematch with how last year had ended against the Texans. Obviously, winner getting in, and Houston ends up winning a playoff game afterwards, and then going into the next round. So it was no small game in my mind. It was definitely a get back game, a revenge game, a prove it game when we were fully healthy, and it still did not pan out the way that I had wanted. And like Kyle said, there is no moral victories for me. Yes, we were competitive. Yes, Anthony Richardson remained healthy. Yes, we saw potential. The defensive line was able to get a hold of CJ Stroud consistently. But when you look at things a little bit deeper, I'm just going to get into one or two topics here. First and foremost, Anthony Richardson is a stud. He is a freak athlete. He is a tank of a human being, and he has got one of the greatest arms I've ever seen on a football field that is not named Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. And then you go and you watch him make plays like that 60-yard pass to Pierce. He had made two 50-plus yard passes to Alec Pierce. And then you go and you see the laser to Ashland Doolin. And then the negatives start to happen. You miss a couple of wide open people. A.D. Mitchell should have had two touchdowns. Wide open, he misses by a couple yards. You talk about the Kylen Granson pass that ended up being intercepted. Yes, Kylen fell, but that still would have been a little bit of a difficult catch for him to make, albeit, again, if he's standing and he dives forward, maybe it's not an interception. And I have to just be critical, man. Like, yes, the potential is there 100%, like I said, but I can't keep going off of he makes one good play and that makes up for 6 bad throws. We lost by 2 points. We should have easily won this game by 10 plus. That is how open receivers were getting in Shane Steichen's offense. Not to mention, we only leveraged Jonathan Taylor 16 times. Yes, we were down a good portion of this game. Yes, we did not touch the ball offensively in the third quarter very much. But when it comes to when we had possessions, some of those drives stalled out too early because Anthony Richardson was not able to put the ball where he needed to be. And that is an issue that he had in college. Can I be a little less critical because this is technically his 5th or 6th NFL game? Absolutely. Can I be a little bit more forgiving? 100%. But if I see that 60-yard back throw or back off of his back foot throw to Alec Pierce saying that we're gonna win for the next 10 plus years on Colts Twitter, I'm gonna lose my mind. I know the good that can come of it. I understand the type of player that we have on this roster. I understand that we were very fortunate to turn this type of player, as raw as he was in college, in just 5 games, he was able to change the game on the snap of a finger. But to win games, you can't have a play a quarter. To win championships, you can't have a good game and have 2 bad games. To win consistently in the NFL, you need to stay healthy and you need to do the little things. I don't need you to throw 55-plus yard bombs to win football games. I need you to hit the check down. I need you to hit the open receiver on the comeback route. I need you to find the open man in the zone. I need you to find a way to throw somebody open in man coverage. It's small, detailed things that quarterbacks in this league need to do. And CJ Stroud did that in spades. Multiple times, found a way to extend the play with his legs, stay behind the line of scrimmage, and make plays with his arm. And they didn't have to be downfield. 10, 15 yards, maybe 20 yards. It was a particular play. I think it was 3rd and 14. We rushed CJ Stroud, flushed out right side, right next to the sideline. Nico Collins is wide open in between two corners, if not a corner and a linebacker, because he was able to keep his eyes downfield, scan the field, and make the right play. I'm not even asking Anthony Richardson to do it on the move because we all know he's mobile. We all know that he can make plays with his legs. He's athletic enough to run past you or mow you down. But I need you to make a play where you don't have a man in your face, where you have time in the pocket in a 5-step, 3-step drop, whatever the case may be. So again, I'm being over analytical because I see the potential. I literally texted Kyle during the game. It's right there. I see what he can become. I see what potential he has. I see his ceiling. But I need it to become a consistent basis for him. I don't need a home run play every single time down the field. And Shane Steichen, as much as I love your offense, some of these trick plays got to chill out. The 2-point conversion, we should have had that. There was no reason to run a quarterback sneak that ends up being a pitch across or a swing end around across to Jonathan Taylor. You're at the 2-yard line. Jonathan Taylor's one of the best backs in football. Hand the ball off, whether that's out of the eye or run the RPO. There's no reason to do this trick, fancy nonsense. So play the game the way it's supposed to be played. Then you talk about the defensive side of the game. We allowed 213 yards on the ground. That's 5.3 yards per carry. Joe Mixon damn near had a career day, if not a career day. I don't know his career stats, but holy hell, 30 carries for 159. We couldn't stop a nosebleed. It wasn't the pass defense that failed us because there were plenty of instances where we broke up plays, but we had stupid penalties. There were plenty of instances where people had to make tough catches, like Nico Collins on 3rd and 6 with 2 minutes remaining, or a little bit under 2 minutes remaining.
That was ridiculous. That was a ridiculous catch.
But CJ put the ball exactly where it needed to be. So, it's you live and you learn. But when it comes to Indianapolis, the future is 100% bright. I cannot wait to see this quarterback develop. Again, I understand it's game 5, but I have to be critical here because all I keep seeing is, oh my God, this throw is absolutely incredible. 2-3 plays ago, you couldn't hit a receiver that was wide open in between the numbers. Am I saying the quarterback position is easy to play? Absolutely not. Am I saying that Anthony Richardson is a bum? Absolutely not. But again, accuracy has been a problem since he was at the University of Florida. He was one of the most inaccurate, if not the worst rated quarterback from an accurate point in that year in college football. That is a lot of quarterbacks in the FBS. And he was one of, if not the worst. I love the athletic portion. I love the arm. I love the presence. I love the leadership. All the characteristics you need for a franchise quarterback, except for the basic necessities of being able to hit a wide receiver in stride. And if you want to be even more critical, that Ashland Doolin touchdown was luck. He throws that any more behind that player, any more behind Doolin, and that is quite literally a laser that's going through the ground. You can throw it as hard as you want. If it's not accurate, it's not relevant. I'm not hating. I think he's great. Did I want to draft him? No. I know people can go and look at the tapes, and they can say that I'm being a hypocrite. I see the potential now in Shane Steichen's offense. It flows. But when it comes to what the Colts need, I need an accurate quarterback. I need my running back to get his touches. And I need that rush defense to fix itself, man, because these are 3 things that throughout a season can become a problem if not corrected immediately. Chris Ballard, you're on the hot seat, in my opinion. We have plenty of opportunities to go make some free agent signings this season, and we did not. Instead, we re-upped a lot of existing players on the defense that did not show up, that's names are not DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore. So if we're being critical, again, Colts got a lot of things to clean up before week 2.
Well, and Kev, I'm just going to keep the split screen between both of us here because there are some other stats that I want to mention about this game in particular. Kev, what do you think the time of possession was for Houston in this game?
Houston doubled us. I think they were over 40 minutes in possession.
It was 40-20, literally even. And I think it kind of goes to the point that you were mentioning where Joe Mixon just ran all over you guys. It just got to the point where, he's getting, 5 yards per carry on average? A little bit over. It's going to be tough to stop. And then you pair that with CJ Stroud. And this is kind of one of the things that I want to mention about CJ Stroud, the passing game, and just the Texans offense as a whole. How many 3rd down conversions were they able to get where it was like 3rd and a long down in distance, or it's a play that the Colts need to make to be able to flip the field, gain possession back, and yet they execute to get that 3rd down conversions? How many times do you think that happened yesterday?
I would say anything over 3rd and 6, probably over 5 times.
And then, like you mentioned, with the one with Nico Collins along the sideline. Th- th- I actually thought that that was an incomplete pass at first. I'm like, there's no way that CJ
I
fit
thought
that
so
ball through.
too.
I thought, but there's no way. And the fact that Nico got his knee down before going out of bounds, just all in
Kudos to
all,
him. Great play.
impressive play. Just really impressive. I mean, really to me, that was granted. There were a lot of like what you consider like plays of the game that took place in that game. Like I would say like the Alex Pierce touchdown. That was one of those like what you would consider as like kind of like one of the plays of the game. But that third down conversion to Nico Collins, that was a ridiculous conversion there. And not only that, it just when you look at the margin of error with the Colts going up against the Texans, it is razor thin because we could both acknowledge here Texans have a good team this year.
Oh,
Granted, CJ Stroud's only in his second year, but you look at the debut of Diggs in Houston, getting 2 touchdowns, getting Nico Collins involved. You got Tank Dell in there as well, and then you have Joe Mixon pop off in the way that he does. The Texans are going to be a really good team, and you look how close Indy kept it, despite all the issues that you mentioned. Indy's going to be a competitive force in this division this year, and I think you look at the mistakes that they made. I think that those mistakes can be fixed. The one thing that I'm going to agree with you 100% is Anthony Richardson's accuracy. If he can dial that in and make the plays that need to be made, especially when it comes to shortening the down and distance on second down and trying to get easy third down conversions, I think that's going to go a long way, especially when you have somebody like JT in the backfield that you can rely on in the run game as well. I think that duo between the two of them in the backfield, I think it's going to be wonders for them as long as Shane is calling in the right plays at the right time. But I kind of want to push the narrative forward a little bit when it comes to Indy because I'm going to look at some of their games here. So up next, they have the Packers, and that's a winnable game, even though that's on the
without
road.
Jordan Love.
But Jordan Love's out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, that's a major blow to the Packers this year. Fortunately, he didn't tear anything more than that because it looked like a pretty bad injury when it happened last week. So the fact that he's still going to be around for the season is kind of a blessing in that regard. After that, they have the Bears and the Colts. They play against the Bears. That's another home game, and then they play the Steelers. You look at these next 3 weeks; these are some winnable games. Then after that, they got the Jags and the Titans for some divisional games. So both those are on the road, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the schedule for the next couple weeks. These are some winnable games. There's a very good chance that by the end of September, as long as they execute at a high level, they could be sitting at 3-1 by the time that we get around to the first week in October when they start going through some divisional matchups in the first 2 weeks of October. So I think there's definitely some things that you take away with from this game that are positive. There are things that you can take away from this game that are negative. And look, I've always looked at it this way. The first month of the season is where teams are adjusting. They're going to make the proper adjustments to really round the team into form, I would say mid to late October. And then by the time November hits, this team, whether it's good or bad, is going to be in the form that they take shape. So overall, competitive game. I thought it was a very fun game to watch. Shout out to Houston getting a pretty solid road win to begin the year. I was a little probably it was probably a little close. It was close to comfort for them. Like, you know, only winning by 2 on the road. Obviously, I think they were probably looking to win by probably more than a possession, but you take a win where you can get it. And when it comes to the Colts, there's definitely potential. Even I saw it. Granted, I didn't watch the game in full. I was on red zone, so they were kind of flipping back and forth between just drives and touchdowns of the sort. But this is a decent team as long as they limit their turnovers, limit the amount of mistakes, and just focus on playing good, solid defense and making sure that Anthony Richardson has time to make the throws and hopefully he makes them accurately. That's really kind of where I see this team right now. And on top of that, use Jonathan Taylor. Use Jonathan Taylor. The dude is fully healthy for the first time in 2 years? Maybe even a little bit more than that. Give him the rock. And we'll talk about David Montgomery later. The Lions gave him the rock, and look what happened. And the rest is history. Like, they ended up getting that overtime win against the Rams. So, I mean, overall, we'll see where things go, but I definitely see the Colts have some winnable games in the next 3 weeks. They got to make the most of it.
Yeah, we got to take advantage. Moving into the next segment, it's going to be the Minnesota Vikings, to which nobody thought they would win by this margin, even with Justin Jefferson getting his contract extension. But whenever you have Daniel Jones on the opposite side of that field, man, you always have a chance for a blowout win. So, Kyle, I'm just going to shoot this one straight. The Giants clearly and obviously made a big mistake when it came to drafting Daniel Jones, but giving him that extension was unforgivable. What are your thoughts on how embarrassed New York got on their home field to start the season?
Well, I also think it was just as bad with the uniforms that they were wearing. They didn't do themselves any favor playing in the uniforms and then playing like that. It was just a bad look across the board. And I mean, just diving into the game here, the Giants couldn't get into any sort of rhythm whatsoever. And to me, just kind of looking at this game before it took place, this on paper looked like a winnable game for the Giants because the Vikings have gone over some roster turnover. Kirk Cousins is no longer there. And there's been a lot of injuries that have taken place with the Vikings throughout the entire offseason. And they just completely didn't pay any mind or any attention to that whatsoever. Sam Darnold carved up that Giants defense like it was nothing. And Sam Darnold started off the game 12 for 12. The accuracy from Sam Darnold was really a sight to behold. And I was really kind of skeptical about the Vikings because I didn't think they were going to be that good in the first game of the year. And they just made the Giants look like a B or C rate team here. And when you look at the Giants, because that's where let's pay the most emphasis and attention to. As far as I'm concerned, their season might be over already, because this, in my mind, was a winnable game for them, and to show up in that manner where you only managed to score 6 points, you just can't have that. Daniel Jones looked awful in this game. 2 interceptions. One of them was a pick six, and it just seemed like once the Vikings got into a rhythm, the Giants just couldn't establish anything to counter against it. And, when it comes to some of the talent that they brought in, I could look at Malik Neighbors, their wide receiver draft pick from this past year's draft. Granted, he was getting some targets. He had 5 receptions, 66 yards. And, that is something that hopefully Daniel Jones and him can lock up some decent chemistry throughout the year. But I just look at this Giants team. This Giants team is weak if this offense can't get any sort of consistent rhythm. And the thing is, I look at the Giants defense as actually a pretty solid defense. But when your offense goes out there and they put that type of performance up in front of your home fans in the home opener, that's just not something that generates a lot of enthusiasm. The confidence is probably going low. If they go on a slide at the beginning of the year, it's only going to go lower. And like you said, Kev, there's going to be this huge emphasis on Daniel Jones getting that contract extension. And the main question associated with it is going to be, why would you do that? We all know that Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback by NFL standards. And yet the front office decided to give him that ridiculous contract. I can understand Giants fans being beside themselves and basically saying, what are we going to do? And I was even making a joke about this to Kev before we even started recording. If you look at that contract and you see the way that Daniel Jones is playing, this almost reminds me of the situation with Jamarcus Russell. Because if you have a situation where he's going to make that much money and he's going to put up numbers like 186 yards passing, not complete half of his passes, and throw 2 interceptions with one of them being a pick six, I mean, that dude is just outright stealing money at that point with those types of performances. That's just not going to cut it whatsoever. So, granted, I know it's early. We're only talking about week 1 here. But there's a very good chance that if the Giants get into a slide and they can't get themselves out of an early hole to start the season, their season might be a wrap by the time we hit October. I mean, people can basically say at this point that their season might be over based on how bad they played against the Vikings. And we don't even know if the Vikings are going to be that good of a team, relatively speaking, throughout the course of the year. This is only the first game. Obviously, we'll see how they play over the next couple of weeks. But if the Giants played like this against the Vikings and the Vikings turn out to be a not good team throughout most of the season, it's going to be a rough year for the Giants. And there's going to be a lot of frustration and there's going to be a lot of anger pointed to not only the team, but the front office. Because this team, from a competitive standpoint, they are going to be fighting an uphill battle the entire year, as far as I'm concerned. They have to get it together quick, fast, and in a hurry here because it could get ugly very quickly.
Yeah, I'm not going to harp on it too much longer. I'm just going to be blunt and honest. I think my analysis is just going to be the Giants front office doesn't know what they're doing. The Giants ownership doesn't know what they're doing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Daniel Jones had a horrible season the year before he got that extension. I mean, he led the Giants to their first playoff berth in God knows how long. Beat the Minnesota Vikings, the number 1 or the number 2 seed, whatever they were at that point in Minnesota. He deserves some kind of payday, but to get $40 million, albeit I know that contract had a lot of stipulations between incentives and the guaranteed money becomes less the further along the contract goes. But this is why I agreed with a lot of Giants fans that I know personally, they should have drafted a quarterback. When you draft a wide receiver like Malik Neighbors, like a Justin Jefferson, like a Jamar Chase, there has to be a quarterback in place to get that person the ball. Malik Neighbors demands the ball. When you have somebody drafted that high, the targets have to come in volume. The targets have to be accurate, and you have to have an offense built around that person. It's hysterical because when you built an offense around a specific player, aka Saquon Barkley, it didn't pan out. I mean, he's in Philly. I mean, he scored 3 touchdowns by himself in Brazil. You guys couldn't muster up 7 points by yourself. I don't know what this front office was thinking. And I feel bad for Neighbors because people try to give him a bad rep on draft night when he made the face of like not wanting to go to New York. I wouldn't want to be here either, bro. Aside from being blessed and fortunate enough to be an athlete and being paid multiple $1 million to play a fucking game, I wouldn't want Daniel Jones throwing me the ball either. And then who's behind him? Tommy DeVito? Like, it's not even Tyrod Taylor anymore. If I'm a wide receiver in that wide receiver room, I hate my life. I did not claw and scratch my way to get to the NFL to be thrown to by a bunch of bums. Respectfully. You know what? Screw it. Disrespectfully. Because Daniel Jones has not made an improvement since he got this contract. And the Giants front office has done nothing to show that they are trying to improve their quarterback room. I don't understand what they were thinking. I don't understand what they're doing. The defense was the only bright side, but because they were constantly on the field, Minnesota eventually cracked down and ended up blowing it out of the water. Sam Darnold had a great game. I've been all offseason. Sam Darnold has been in crappy situation after crappy situation after crappy situation. His best scenario was in Carolina, and then he got hurt. Were his numbers fantastic? No, but he made the best with the opportunities that he had with Matt Rule as his head coach, and then whoever the hell, I think Steve Wilks, came in afterwards. To which then Baker Mayfield was there, and it was a quarterback carousel after that before Bryce Young. But the point of what I'm getting at is Sam Darnold has never had an opportunity to flourish. He had a season under Mike McDaniel, not Mike McDaniels, excuse me. He had a season under, oh my God, he's literally the coach of the 49ers. Mike Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan. This is what we were talking about last week. We were a little rusty. When you have a season to study behind Kyle Shanahan and learn that offense and gain confidence and work with talent, this is probably the most talented roster he's actually had his hands on. When you talk about Justin Jefferson and whenever Hockenson gets back, and now you have freaking Aaron Jones in the backfield and Jordan Addison on the other side, like they have a lot of potential on that offense. So I think that Minnesota will be fine. Are they going to win the division? By no means, no. But Sam Darnold is going to prove a lot of people wrong and show that he was worth that $10 million and that was a steal. Is he the quarterback of the future? Obviously not, with J.J. McCarthy, healing and looming in the wins. But he is not a bum. At least I don't believe he is. And I think he showed enough this week to at least keep doubters a little bit at bay. But when it comes to the New York Giants, man, there is really no words I can say other than I'm sorry to all my Giant fan friends. It is not smack talk. It is not shit talk. These are all conversations that we have had personally in a group, on the phone. We all know that the Giants are not going to win a lot of football games this year. They may be one of the worst teams in football. But from a strict Daniel Jones perspective, this was 100% on the Giants themselves. They decided to extend him. They caved and gave him 40. They didn't think that they could do better without him. And now they're looking at potentially having another top 5, if not worse, pick in the NFL draft this coming April.
Yeah, I think basically when it comes to the situation with the Giants, if they spiral, it's going to get ugly quick. And I mean, we even talked about it before we started recording. I mean, Daniel Jones was getting heckled by the fans leaving the stadium yesterday, basically saying, can I get a milli too? Can I get a million? If you have that in week one, that is a recipe for disaster, my guy. And it's like I said, we could even look at the Giants' schedule over the next couple of weeks. Let's see what sort of games that they have on the slate. So they got the Commanders next. That's going to be an away game. After that, they played the Browns. That's actually a game that they might win because the Browns looked like dog shit this past weekend. Then a guaranteed loss against the Cowboys. They're going to have an uphill battle against the Seahawks, and then they played the Bengals and the Eagles after that. So this does not look good for them. This entire slate, just like the next, like I'd say 6 to 7 weeks, dude, I might see like one win, maybe two, and two is kind of pushing it. The only games that I think that they could really win are either against the Commanders and probably the Browns, because I think the Bengals are going to get their shit together by the middle
You
of
hope.
October. If
You
they
hope.
don't, then they're going to be in real trouble. But yeah, I think this has recipe of disaster written all over it, bro. Like I think it's gonna be a long year for the boys in blue at this point. So
You ain't lying. But I mean, that's going to push us into the next quarterback play, the next matchup that we're looking at. By leaps and bounds, I think Caleb Williams right now is already better than Daniel Jones, and I was never a Caleb Williams fan to begin with. But we're going to dive right into the debut of the number one overall pick in the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams going up against my division rival, the Tennessee Titans. Uh, Obviously, this game was hard to watch. I was watching bits and pieces of it while at the bar. I wasn't really paying too much attention to it outside of Cole Kmet and DeAndre Swift, who both screwed me, might I add, in fantasy. So thanks for nothing, guys. But you look at the matchup of Will Levis, a supposed or a former potential top prospect in last year's draft who ended up falling into the second or third round for Tennessee. And then, of course, the number one overall pick in Caleb Williams. People thought this was going to be at least somewhat of a competitive game. And to an extent, it was. It just wasn't an exciting competitive game because the Bears did not score an offensive touchdown. This was all special teams and defense. And Caleb
mhm.
Williams had a lackluster performance, to say the least, as did Will Levis. So, Kyle, I'm going to shoot this one your way.
Mhm.
I, dude, this wasn't a fun game to watch. Caleb Williams didn't really look exciting. What were your thoughts on how the Bears looked in week one and how the Titans looked too?
Kev, I gotta say, the meme that's been going around of Will Levis having his hands on the back of his helmet after he gave up that
Hilarious.
pick six, dude, that's one of the funniest memes I've seen. And dude, it's week one. If the memes are already that good, I can't wait for the rest of the season because once the memes get going, there's no stopping it. But yeah, when it comes to the quarterback battle that we saw from Will Levis and Caleb Williams this past weekend, to me, it did not live up to expectations in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, a lot of attention was paid towards Caleb Williams getting his debut in the NFL, but he couldn't complete 50% of his passes. He only threw for 93 yards in this game. And like Kev said in the lead up, no offensive touchdowns in this game. The Bears had to rely on their special teams and their defense to be able to get points throughout the entire course of the game. And that was where, to me, it was actually kind of compelling is that, the Bears won this game without really any sort of offensive spark that you can mention, yet their defense and their special teams were able to come up with crucial points at crucial moments of the game to get them this win. And I know a lot of people are talking about, oh, like this is the first time that a number one uh, pick, as far as the quarterback is concerned, has won their debut since I think like 2002. It's been over 20 years at this point since we've seen something like that. Caleb Williams was not really responsible for this win. It was their defense and their special teams that got them this win. And also Will Levis being an idiot by just literally tossing the ball in the air and hoping something that could happen. And the worst case scenario happened in that pick six towards the end of the game. So when it comes to Caleb Williams, obviously we still have a lot to see from him. This is only the first game. And when you look back at what he did with USC, obviously you see the potential is there. But this is not a good reflection of what I think that he could bring to the table based off of this week one performance. If you were to give this any sort of letter grade, you're looking at like a C minus and probably getting down closer to like a D or an F at this point, just because there's nothing of note that I could really point to here. You know, you can't even complete half your passes and you can't even hit over 100 yards in your first game. And I think that this will probably be his basement as far as the performances that he's going to have for the rest of the year. Because I think after this performance, there's nowhere to go but up. So, overall, at least Chicago got a win, got their home opener in week one in their favor. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, this is not something that I'm going to really put a lot of emphasis on because I think, Caleb's going to be able to turn it up sooner rather than later and have better performances than this. But yeah, definitely not his best that we'll see from him this year. But overall, it was a good team win from the Bears. And that's something that they're going to have to rely on early on when it comes to Caleb's early NFL career. Because, if there's going to be games where he's off this poorly, they're going to have to rely on their defense and their special teams to be able to come up with timely plays, either turnovers on the defensive side of the ball or potential punt returns and kick returns for the special teams aspect of the team. But like I said, it was good enough for the win, but there's a lot left to be determined when it comes to the Bears as a whole and Caleb Williams specifically.
I mean, again, I never had faith in Caleb coming out of college. Kyle and I had extensive conversations about this. I talked to a lot of college football fans. When it comes to what he was able to do at USC, the big play capability, similar to what I was saying with Anthony Richardson, Kyle, you can keep a dual screen. That's there, right? Like we saw the bang bang plays, the crazy scrambles, and the rollouts, and he had one of the worst offensive lines in the FBS alongside Shedeur Sanders. But when it came time to play big schools, when it came time to play top tier talent, he crumbled. Mm-hmm. When it came time for him to make the splash plays that he needed to make as a quarterback, he didn't. He had an under 50% completion percentage in the preseason. He wasn't looking good early in training camp. He tries to do too much with his legs, trying to extend plays instead of throwing the ball away or hitting his checkdowns or just making his first read. He has to understand that he has to break this game down, right? As a quarterback in the NFL, in college, you know that you have your set assignments, right? I'm looking at the X, and then my next read is going to be the check down, and then if the wide receiver, and then if the tight end on the dump off comes out the block, I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. He does too much. He needs to learn how to relax. Yes, you're in a big market. You were the number one overall pick. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? I want to give him a pass. Again, I didn't like Caleb Williams and how he handled his draft situation, and I'm not working out for nobody. You know what you like. You know what you see, blah, 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 blah. His arrogance is really high, and he hasn't really done much of anything in the NFL other than this game, and if you want to consider whatever the preseason was. But for people to go and boast about him being the first quarterback to lead a team to a win, you didn't lead much of anything, brother. You didn't do much of shit, to be quite frank. And when it comes to the hype around him, I would like him to be successful because I'm tired of seeing top 2, top 3 quarterbacks that get taken fall apart. But then again, that's more of an insult to the GM because they don't know how to scout properly. But again, that's neither here nor there. Caleb has the dynamic. Caleb has the arm. He's got the persona. He's got the confidence at the bare minimum. But when it comes to execution, when it comes to doing things when it matters, when it comes to the clutch, I don't know if he's going to be able to carry that through the NFL. Because, again, when USC went against top talent, he was horrible. Turnovers, bad passes, bad decisions.
Accuracy.
Potentially, just throwing his body out there for no reason. And not to mention that infamous clip of him running to the stands and crying on national television in his mom's arms. I'm all for player emotions. I'm all for mental health. You have a tough game.
But like, come on.
Time and place, brother. You want to be this cocky macho man.
Do it in private.
Right. Exactly. So I hold Caleb Williams to a different regard than a lot of other players, a lot of other people. Again, I didn't think he was that good to begin with. I think Jayden Daniels is an overall better quarterback, and I think that showed suit in his first NFL game, albeit they didn't win, but he sure as hell played a lot better than Caleb did.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that I'm going to expect from Caleb because of the hype. So in terms of this game, again, Kyle already reiterated, it's defensive and special teams, ain't got shit to do with Caleb. When you flip it to Tennessee, Tony Pollard looked pretty solid. I thought
Hmm.
that Tennessee made some plays on the offensive side that showed that they had potential. Obviously, Calvin Ridley's there. DeAndre Hopkins is there. They don't have bums
Oh, they
on
should have
this
won this
team.
game. They should have won. They were
But when it
dominating the
comes
game for the most. They were
when
up.
it comes to Will Levis, this is what you get when you have mayonnaise in your coffee and you eat bananas with the skin on, bro. You're weird. It's not gonna fly, bro. It's just it ain't gonna be that. That's not, you not it. You not that guy. And that meme or that GIF or that picture, it says 1,000 words, brother. Whatever the hell you thought you saw, I rode Carson Wentz for throwing a left hand pass in the end zone that ended up being a pick six and we lost the game. That was just as bad. You just flailing it out to the flat and hoping that it falls incomplete. For that, you take the sack. So
Live to see
this
another
was a
down.
horrible game to watch. This was a horrible game to watch. Like, this was not an entertaining game, and I probably wouldn't have paid it any mind if I didn't have fantasy players in the Chicago Bears. But when it comes to the quarterback play, this may have been one of the worst quarterback plays I've seen in a long time. And we've seen some bad games. So I don't know what else is there to say, but
I,
not entertaining, underwhelming from Caleb Williams, and I don't expect much from the Titans.
you know what? I have to ask this. And Kev, don't hold back. Just be as honest as you can with me on this one. What about the finger paint shit?
The finger paint doesn't bother me. Is it something that I would do? No. But
Why?
you can express yourself however you want. I don't care. That has nothing to do with anything. I think it's different. I wouldn't do it myself. But if you've been doing it since high school and it works and it's just superstition and you want to embrace it, just like the Sixers top draft pick this year in the draft that now is sponsored by like nail polish, like, dude, you want to make your bank, go do what you got to do. As long as you're not distracting anybody saying you got to come get a manicure with me, you got to go do this with me, you got to do this ad with me, fine. Again, different perspective, different outlook. If it's what you like to do, by all means. But if you're going to do that and you're going to shit the bed, it's going to make people look at you differently. You know what I'm saying? In more ways than one. But the finger paint stuff doesn't bother me. It's definitely it's a different outlook on life. It's a different take, but it has no effect on him throwing the football. And it sure as shit didn't make any difference to how bad Caleb performed in those games.
Just play the hypothetical with me for a second. Just humor me on this one. If you went back home and you saw the homies, saw the boys back in the Bronx, and you had the finger paint shit.
I'm gonna get rode, bro. I'm gonna get made fun of. Again, it's just culturally, it's not what I'm used to. It's not what I've seen. It's not what I've been around. I would get made fun of. But again, Caleb has apparently been doing this since
I
high
know.
school. So it's
I know.
like,
I know there's
if
going to be some
anything,
sort of reason behind it.
I commend him for staying consistent. He ain't switch up. You know, now he's got the millions of dollars. He didn't have to continue it if he didn't
Yeah.
want to. If he was trying to make a statement in college, and then he's like, you know what, I still got drafted number one overall, but he's still doing it. I think he's riding it a little thick or laying it on a little thick with the messages on it. But again, yo, bro, you got the bag. You're the number one overall pick in a big market like Chicago. You just got to play better.
It's weird. I understand that there's a reason behind it. I totally get that. I understand the commentators throughout the game were making points or references to it. I totally get that. But dude, like if this is just him, that's fine. But there are a lot of people probably looking at that like, dude, like, mm-mm, mm-mm. But as long as he goes out there and he performs, like when it comes to Bears fans, they don't care. If he goes out there and throws 3 or 4 touchdowns, throws for 300 yards, and gets the Bears consistent wins, I guarantee you the fans will start painting their fingernails next, just to kind of go with the momentum. Then at that point,
100%.
and
The city
trust me,
just wants to win.
and the Bears have been overdue for some winning days, because when was the last time that they were actually a legitimate playoff contender?
Jay Cutler probably when they were making the playoffs with Brandon Marshall and them, and that wasn't consistent. That was like
Grossman?
that was a Super Bowl year, yeah. But I'm
Yeah.
thinking like more recently because I'm pretty sure they made it once or twice with Cutler. I just can't remember. I know they made it with Mitchell Trubisky, obviously that one year.
Yeah. What was the year that they went? I think it was 12-4, and they had the double doink against the Eagles. Was that
The Eagles? That was Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, that was what, 6 years ago?
Oh, that was the first year Isabel and I were together, so that was the first playoffs. That had to be 2019. I think it was 5 years ago.
Okay, so
'Cause that's when they played against Nick Foles, and then Nick Foles ended up losing that next game in New Orleans
oh,
because
that
Alshon
was the
Jeffrey
I'm still hurt for Alshon over that game.
that was his first drop of the season.
Like, I mean, that's exactly the
Yeah,
way that
man.
you're supposed. Like, it just went right through. Like,
Mhm.
he was hurt after that game.
Yep, as you
He
should be.
like, I mean, like the form was there. It just went straight through.
So
It
it
happened,
it is it is what it is in that regard. But yeah, no, the Bears haven't been good in a while. I
but
think Caleb has the potential. It's you gotta show it now because all the talking, all the confidence, and the ads and the commercials and Hard Knocks. It's time to start putting your money where your mouth is, my boy. You know what I'm saying? You got to start
and
doing it.
and the thing is, they better start winning because if they falter and he ends up going down the road of potentially being a bust, dude, I'm just putting it out there. I think everybody knows this at this point. If he goes down that road of potentially being a bust, they are going to roast him over this. They're going to
Yeah,
roast
but
him
it's also going
over
to
it.
go down to the front office because they're going to say that they ruined Justin Fields, they ruined Caleb
Well, yeah,
Williams.
that well, and the thing is,
So
they have to make sure that they bolster the offensive line. I mean, they have some decent targets. I mean, they have Rome, they have Keenan Allen, they have
Rome's
DJ.
out. He's week to
What?
week. He
Yeah, I saw that. I think he got some sort of
sprained his
yeah,
MCL.
yeah, it was a knee sprain. So I saw the same thing as well. But I mean, they have targets there. So the targets are not, and you got DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Like, this is a good offense just from a skill position perspective. But it's going to come down to the offensive line, and you know that story, unfortunately, all too well when it comes to offensive line protection. I mean, it's just
Nothing but pain and suffering when it
it's
comes to that.
listen. I'm guaranteeing you right now, like if Caleb doesn't, if his path in the NFL doesn't go well, and it could be pointed back to the offensive line, Bears fans are going to have a difficult time dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a tough one. But they're off to a good start. They're 1-0. We'll see where it goes. And obviously, I think Caleb is going to have better performances from here on out, but not the most exciting debut that I've seen from a rookie quarterback. But we'll see where he goes from here. But with that said, we're going to keep it within the NFC, and we're going to transition to the Commanders and Bucks game that took place in Tampa Bay this past weekend. The Bucks just flat out cooked against the Commanders this past weekend, winning by the score of 37-20. This was also the debut of Jaden Daniels, the number 2 pick in this past year's NFL draft. And granted, we just talked about Caleb, but you can make a case that Jaden had a better overall debut against the Bucks than Caleb did against the Titans. Granted, Jaden did not get a win in his debut. Caleb did, but there were definitely some flashes that we saw from Jaden in this game that I think Commanders fans may be excited about in the near future and then hopefully in the long-term future as well. But to kick it to the Bucks, Baker Mayfield had what I would consider as a career day, 24 of 30, 289 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. He was lighting it up pretty much throughout the entire course of the game. And to basically damn near put up 40 in the home opener is a very good start for the Bucks. And I think when it comes to the Bucks, it looks like they're going to be in good competition with the Saints after what the Saints did to Carolina this past weekend. So the Bucks got off to a good start. We'll see where they go after week 1. But Kev, let's dive into this game because obviously Baker had a great game to start off the year. How would you assess this win with the Bucks with essentially dominating the Commanders in week 1?
I think we got to start putting some respect on Baker Mayfield's name, man. A lot of people wanted to write him off in Cleveland. A lot of people called him a bum, a bust. He wasn't worth the number 1 overall pick. A lot of people said that he wasn't going to do good anywhere he went. They said that he was worth nothing when the Browns wanted to go and get Deshaun Watson, and look how great that turned out for them. Joe Flacco came off the couch and outplayed him, but that's neither here nor there. Then obviously he goes out to Carolina. He doesn't play well, and then he goes to LA and he plays pretty solid. Tampa takes a gamble on him, pays him the minimum, more than the minimum, and he leads him to the playoffs. Then you got today, or should I say yesterday, where he pops off and goes for 4 tuts. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I watched the whole game, but from what I did see, Baker was confident. Baker made good decisions. Baker didn't turn the ball over, and the numbers speak for itself. You had an 86 QBR and a 146 passer rating, albeit it was the Commanders, but this is what you're supposed to do against bad teams. You played against a rookie quarterback. You had to make sure that you dominated. They ran the ball pretty effectively for the most part of that game. I mean, they had 112 yards. It wasn't anything flashy, but they stood consistent at least. And Baker Mayfield made the throws he needed to make. You included the players that you needed to in order to move the ball down the field. Mike Evans got touches. Chris Godwin got touches. Rachaad White got a whole lot of touches, both running and receiving. So they took advantage and they capitalized. Baker Mayfield needs to get a lot more respect than he does, man. I'm not going to sit here and say he's a top 5 quarterback, but if he has a couple more games like this on a consistent basis, might I add, you're going to have to start having conversations about whether or not Baker Mayfield's a top 10 quarterback in this league. Because again, nobody expected him to do what he did last year. Nobody expected him to go out here and follow up with a week 1 opening ass whooping like this. Yes, the Bucs were favored, but to bust their ass like this was kind of crazy, especially now that Dan Quinn took over the head coaching position. So you thought that Washington defense was going to come a little bit more prepared, but Baker was sacked 1 time. 6 incompletions total in the game. He fried. Like, he torched them, and this is what he needs to do. So, like I said, man, my narrative here is just to pay a lot more attention to Baker, give him the credit he deserves, give him his flowers. He's done a lot more for this Bucs team than a lot of people expected. Obviously, replacing Tom Brady was a hard task to do, but he came in, he filled that void, he did what he needed to do, and again, when it comes to beating a bad football team, that's what you're supposed to do as a good one. Now flipping it to Jaden Daniels, better game than Caleb. That's to say the least, bare minimum, right? But 17 of 24, not horrible. 184 yards, again, not horrible. Didn't make a lot of bad decisions. Didn't turn the ball over. He had 88 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Like, he did what he felt he needed to do. And again, as a rookie, it's going to take a couple of games for you to kind of get into a rhythm and develop relationships with your receivers, because the preseason and OTAs and camp, you're not really able to get live game action outside of maybe some of those joint practices, to where, again, there's no contact to the quarterback. So you're not really getting authentic game reps. But when it comes to what he was able to do with minimal help, I think that he did the best that he could. And I hope, and I say this again, I hope that this is going to be an offense to where Jaden Daniels can thrive. And Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have Cliff Kingsbury as their OC.
I mean, I could look it up real quick. I could just scroll
I'm
through.
pretty sure I'm pretty sure he is, because I know he was rumored to also be in Vegas, but I think he decided to go with Dan Quinn's staff. So overall,
Yep.
I thought it was it is Cliff.
Yep.
Overall, I thought it was a solid game for him. Again, they do need a little bit of help on the defensive side of the ball, but I think Jaden Daniels will be fine. But when it comes to Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's nothing to slight. That was a very impressive game by Baker.
No, and Kev, we'll keep the split screen here. When it came to Baker, this was probably one of the best games I've ever seen him play. And to do it in week 1 and in the manner that he did it, it was just phenomenal. And I think when it comes to Baker potentially being a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, I think you could definitely make that case, just because you look at the success that he had last year. I'll flat out say this. I didn't think the Bucs were going to make it into the playoffs last year. I thought they would have been just on the outside of potentially making the playoffs, and yet he proved me wrong. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that Baker was the one leading the offense and doing a pretty solid job in that regard. And another thing, because I know we've been talking about Baker here for a minute, but somebody who is just the model of consistency is Mike Evans. Mike Evans, I don't know how old he is. I think he's like 31 or 32. He might even be a little bit older than that. But the fact of the matter is that he's still putting up numbers this consistently 10 plus years into his career. Really, like, a tip of the cap to the guy. Gets 5 receptions, 2 of them are touchdowns. And I think the second one was really impressive. Like, he was able to kind of snag it at the last second. It could have been the first one. I could be mistaken. But you have that. You have Chris Godwin getting 8 catches for over 80 yards. Also got a touchdown as well. Baker just did a great job on Sunday, just passing the ball around to multiple targets, getting Jalen McMillan his first NFL career touchdown as well in the first week. That's going to be huge for that wide receiver core. And on top of that, you have Rachaad White in the background, who's just a great overall back, not only in the ground game, but in the passing game as well. This Bucs offense, if they're able to protect Baker and open up good run lanes consistently for Rachaad White, this team can win the division. I think it's really going to be between them and the Saints this year. And we already talked about the Saints basically just whooping on Carolina like they did in week 1. But the Bucks showed that they could run it with the best of them as far as the amount of points that we saw compared to other teams offensively throughout week one. Now, granted, it is only week one, and this could just be a flash in the pan, and they may have not the best performance going into the next couple of weeks. But for this week one performance, man, they showed up, they balled out, and frankly, in my opinion, they did what they were supposed to do. You beat a rookie quarterback. And granted, I think Jaden Daniels, he had the better debut than Caleb did, than Caleb Williams did. And I think overall, I think the one thing that I liked about Jaden in this game is that he was able to show that he could pass the ball effectively at times. Granted, we'll look at the consistency, we'll look at the accuracy as improvements the more games and more game reps that he gets. But, his ability to scramble, get extra yards, fight for extra yards, that's something that could serve him well. The only thing is he's going to have to learn how to slide. His slides are not pretty. It's more like somersaults at this point. So hopefully they instill it into him where he could be able to effectively slide when he's on the move. But, overall, I definitely see the potential with him. I would like to hope that they would add some extra receivers around him because really the only wide receiver of note here on the Commanders is Terry McLaurin. Granted, they have Zach Ertz and they have Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. out of the backfield, but you need to have more targets. You have to really surround Jaden with some decent options here. You have Luke McCaffrey as well, but I don't think that's going to be able to cut it with the receivers. But I definitely thought that there were some upsides with his debut this past weekend. It just came at a bad time because the Bucs showed up and really didn't make any noticeable mistakes offensively in that game. They were in rhythm the entire game, and that Washington defense got absolutely carved up the entire day. Great game from the Bucs, and I think a decent debut from Jaden Daniels, but obviously I think he'll want a better result as far as getting a win in that column down the line. But no, it was a good performance from the Bucs. I got to give them credit on that one.
100%. And I mean, guys, to wrap this up finally on the terms of the slate recap, the game of the week, in my opinion, to be completely honest, this game went back and forth. It was the Goff versus Stafford rematch. Obviously, they had an incredible wild card game that came down to the wire to where obviously the Lions moved on to the divisional round. Matthew Stafford once again makes his return to Detroit, to where the Rams kind of started off relatively hot. Excuse me, no. The Lions started off kind of hot, and then the Rams go and scored 17 unanswered, and then the Lions come back, and we're going to overtime, and before you know it, Detroit wins the toss, and that's all she wrote. David Montgomery, as Kyle alluded to, mowed them down, scored that game-winning touchdown, which catapulted the Lions to a 1-0 start this season. But Kyle, I mean, this game was entertaining all the way through. There was not a dull moment in any moment of this game. So I got to ask your thoughts on how you thought the Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford part 2 had gone over.
I thought this was a great game across the board. When you look at this game in totality, the Lions definitely had what I would consider a better second half than they did in the first half. It was kind of a slugfest in the first half. But really, I would say, getting towards the end of the first half and then going into the second half, I would say that the Lions had a pretty good stretch where they were up 17-3, and it looked like they were going to be able to comfortably win this game. And then all of a sudden, the Rams flip the switch. Matt Stafford gets hot, and they put up 17 straight points, going up 20-17 late in the fourth quarter. And there was a point in time in this game where I look back on, this was a third down opportunity to be able to convert on it for the Rams. They get this conversion. They potentially ice the game here and lead Detroit with a huge road win to start off the year. Unfortunately, Matt Stafford can't drop it in the bucket for Cooper Kupp. The Lions get the ball back. They march down the field for a game-tying field goal. Like Kev alluded in the lead-up, the Lions win the coin toss going into overtime. And David Montgomery, my dad, my brother, and I, we watched this game, and we watched that overtime drive led by David Montgomery. He was absolutely phenomenal on that drive. They made the decision to just give him the rock and just let him do his thing. It was a thing of beauty. They basically said, we're going to run it down your throat, and you're not going to do anything to stop it. It was really what I would consider one of the best drives that I've seen pretty much throughout the entire first week of the NFL so far. It was really a sight to behold, that drive, because they just stuck with the run game and never looked back. So when you look at the quarterback matchup in this game as well, this was a competitive game. I wouldn't say that this was the best performance that we've seen from either quarterback. There were some errant passes from both of them. Both of them had turnovers in this game. But, you look at Jared Goff and Matt Stafford. There were points in this game where they were able to make the plays that needed to be made, especially Stafford. Stafford really led that 17-0 run to put them up 20-17 late in the second half. He could not miss. That connection with him and Cooper Kupp is still solid. And I think people forgot just how good Cooper Kupp is at just his overall route running and the ability to be able to make great catches at timely opportunities. He was absolutely instrumental in that comeback for the Rams. Even though that they lost in this game, that Stafford-Cooper Kupp connection is solid. And they're going to need that connection for the next couple of weeks because Puka Nacua is going to be out for the next 4 weeks. So they're going to have to rely on that and then obviously focus on making sure that Kyren Williams gets some solid touches in the backfield as well. And then Jared Goff, the one thing that I'll say about the Lions is that I wish that they got Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit more involved. Didn't get a lot of targets in week 1. I will say that Jameson Williams had a really solid game. Obviously, when it comes to him, he's going to be a huge wide receiver, and they're expecting big things from him in Detroit for not only this season, but hopefully years to come. He had a great debut in this game. And I wouldn't say debut, but just an overall good week 1 performance for him. And then obviously you have Laporta as well. So they have options, but that wide receiver core is a little weak with Detroit. And that may be something that if guys start going down with injuries, that's something that could be exploited against them throughout the year. But overall, this was a fantastic game. I agree with Kevin this one. I think this was probably the best game that we saw from week 1, just as far as a pure excitement and just as far as it being compelling goes. And I'll be honest with you, this may be a potential playoff matchup down the line. I think that both of these teams could actually run it back once again if both teams were to make it to the playoffs. I think the Lions are probably in a better position to make the playoffs. I think when it comes to the Rams, they're going to have to try to finagle one of those wild card spots because I think the 49ers are head and shoulders above them. But I would love to see these two teams go back at it again and have a potential Matt Stafford and Jared Goff rematch in Detroit. I think that would be absolutely fantastic, and it would be a game that I would look forward to. But overall, great win for the Lions, especially getting it in overtime despite all the adversity that came along with it. They were able to make the plays that needed to be made in the clutch, and that's why they're sitting at 1-0. But the Rams, got to give them respect. Coming back from that hole, 17-3, that was good on their part. They just couldn't close. They couldn't make that third down conversion, and they couldn't stop David Montgomery at the end. So it was a good effort by them, but unfortunately they fall a little bit short. But overall, great game.
So I'm not going to do any more of a deep dive into that game aside from just talking about real quick. The Rams had a shit ton of injuries. I think they were down to their third string left tackle. Mm-hmm. That was absolutely wild for them to be that competitive, to surge on through and score those 17 unanswered. And then obviously you talk about the injury to Puka Nacua. There were some instances to where LA looked like they were screwed. Shout out to Sean McVay and that coaching staff for keeping them locked in, keeping them focused, and finding a way to will that comeback. So kudos to them. We've talked about this prior to it. No, you could keep it split. I want to get your thoughts on this because we talked about this prior to the episode. There was a looming narrative when this trade happened a few years back that this was going to be the trade into oblivion. Jared Goff is going to be sent off to Detroit for his career to die for the remainder of his contract.
It's like a black hole.
They swore it was over. They got Matt Stafford, and right now it is 100% Rams up on Detroit because the Rams have won a Super Bowl. They traded their future away, and I think this was their first round pick that they've had in the last 8 seasons since acquiring not only since acquiring oh my goodness, Matt Stafford, but they also traded for Jalen Ramsey and a couple of other big picks where they had to give up a boatload of their future. What I'm getting at is this trade is not so lopsided anymore. Aside from the Super Bowl, which is the glooming, glaring, obvious answer. So yes, the Rams still won. I'm not trying to make that argument. This trade as years progress, becomes more and more almost dead set even from a performance standpoint than people like to let on. Led by Dan Campbell and this front office, Jared Goff has put the long awaited Lions that have been relatively abysmal for longer than the two of us have been alive to NFC championship contenders, to Super Bowl contenders. Jared Goff was, I think, second in the league in passing yards last year. Jared Goff was also a former number 1 overall pick that led the Rams to a Super Bowl and had a piss poor performance. So when it comes to these two quarterbacks facing off for the second time in 2 years, like you said, this isn't just a playoff matchup. This could be for all the meat and
It's a
potatoes.
rivalry.
Exact. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is what I'm alluding to. This could potentially be oh, you thought I was finished on some meek shit. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you thought this was over. If the Lions somehow pull off a Super Bowl in the next 2 seasons, I think the Lions win the trade. The Lions got picks. The Lions got a franchise quarterback. The Lions did not have to pay a crazy amount of cap right away until I think last season or the season before. The Lions got a good head coach, and they didn't have to go out and pay and shell all this crazy money to all these other people like they did to Aaron Donald, and they had to pay it out to freaking Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford. After last season, now the Lions had to make some payments because they had to re-sign some of the offensive line. They had to give Amon-Ra St. Brown a contract. But these are all homegrown talents. J-Mo, Jahmyr Gibbs. Then obviously you have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penny Sewell. Like, a lot of these players were drafted and developed in Detroit. That Super Bowl team, outside of maybe Aaron Donald, was all acquired through free agency and trades.
Yeah.
So when you really talk about who wins a trade, again, as of right now, I'm not trying to make the argument today that the Rams did not. Until the Lions win a Super Bowl, not appear in a Super Bowl, until the Lions win a Super Bowl, the Rams win the trade. But again, it's getting closer, and if the Lions win a Super Bowl, this trade automatically becomes one of the more, not controversial, but one of the more dead set even trades in NFL history, to where both organizations were revitalized to be successful. And if Detroit wins, in my opinion, they come out on top, because Stafford's going to retire in the next 2 seasons. Detroit's going to be good for years to come. I hate this thumb thing. I hate that it keeps doing that with the software update for Apple. But anyway, I think that this blatantly becomes 100% a win for Detroit. So, I mean, I don't know if you agree, but it's such a fascinating storyline to me.
You know what I was kind of thinking of here? I might be wild for this, but I don't really care. You know what Jared Goff kind of reminds me of in a sense? I don't necessarily think that the timelines are exactly the same, but I can't help but say this. Jared Goff may be similar to what I thought Alex Smith was, as far as the way that his career started. Alex Smith got progressively better throughout his career, because at first it was kind of rough. But I can't really say that, because I just kind of looked at Jared Goff's stats here. His career touchdowns happened in 2018, where he threw for 32 touchdowns with the Rams. I think that might have been the year where
he had that shootout with Patty.
Yeah, like it was like 51-45, some ridiculous score.
What an amazing game I got to watch! Oh my god!
Yeah, it was one of the greatest games I've ever seen. But there was a downturn. There was a downturn when Jared went to Detroit, because the first season that he was a starter there, he was 3-10-1 as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started to kind of get it together in 2022. He went 9-8, and then last year, obviously 12-5, went all the way to the NFC Championship game. Fell a little bit short going to the Super Bowl. I would say that trade essentially, you could say, revitalized his career, but if they end up winning a Super Bowl because of it, where, if Detroit ends up winning a Super Bowl either like this year or like another year or two, I mean, you could basically say that that trade may have actually saved his career. Not just revitalized it. It may have saved it, because I just remember that time when he was in LA, especially towards the end, where there were constant rumors about whether or not that he was going to be the long-term option at quarterback for them. And, Unfortunately for them, that one year they went to the Super Bowl where he was a starter, 3 points. Now, granted, they were going up against New England's defense. I'll give them that. But that's tough to look back on. You had a team that was really good. I think in that year, they went like 13-3. Like the Rams were a really solid team that year. It's just for them, unfortunately for them, in the game that they needed it the most, he was only able to provide 3 points. But I think you look at where his career is at now. I mean, he's coming off of his career best year in completion percentage. He completed 67% of his passes last year. Pretty solid. I think the biggest thing for them is to just maintain the consistency and just be able to find that next step. I think they're close. I still think that when it comes to the NFC as a whole, I still think the 49ers are a better team. The 49ers are injured, though. So we'll see how the 49ers are able to navigate that this year. But Detroit, as far as I'm concerned, they're a top 2 team in the NFC at this point. And they have a very legitimate chance to potentially be the number 1 team in the NFC if they play their cards right and if the 49ers were to somewhat falter. But as I see it right now, I think that trade between Matt Stafford and Jared Goff, I'm with you 100%. I think it's pretty much kind of like an even split at this point. I would still say that, that Super Bowl definitely helps out Matt Stafford, but the way Jared Goff's been playing, dude, and he's got a lot more time left. If you had to guess, how old do you think Jared Goff is?
I think he's 30.
He's 29. 29. He's got plenty of years left, dude. And playing with Dan Campbell, like, this is a good scenario that they have going for them here. I really want to see this team win a Super Bowl. And I can't even imagine the excitement that this team would be able to bring to the city of Detroit if they were able to bring in a Super Bowl. I mean, that would just be electric for the city. And I don't know necessarily. It's way too early to tell if this is actually the team that's going to do it. But they are moving in that direction. I think it's going to come down to that defense being able to step up and Jared Goff executing in the clutch. I think if they're able to do those two things and hopefully avoid injury, they got a shot. They got a shot. Granted, there's other teams that can compete with them in the NFC, but they're in the top 2 teams right now, maybe 3. I had to throw the Eagles in there just because of how they played against the Packers, but and hell, even the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys are right there too. I mean, bro, the top 4 teams in the NFC are just absolutely stacked at this point. So, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, we'll see how things play out, but overall, I think they're in a good spot here, especially post that trade with Matt Stafford and Jared Goff. But with that said, we're just going to do a quick roundup of some of the other Week 1 games here. We're just going to go through the scores, maybe make a mention of it real quick. We'll just focus on the Sunday games. We don't have to worry about the games that took place prior to that. We already mentioned it. The Saints just put an absolute beatdown on the Panthers this past weekend, winning by the score of 47-10. Derek Carr was absolutely phenomenal in this game. And I remember I recorded a short not too long ago where I said, if they can't protect, if the Panthers can't protect Bryce Young, they're pretty much screwed for the season. That pretty much played out exactly not as I predicted, but it played out exactly how I said it. And I think when it comes to the Panthers, they're going to have a very long season this year. The biggest upset of the week had to be, I think, the Patriots beating the Bengals on the road, winning by the score of 16-10. The Patriots managed this game extremely well. They played, I wouldn't say perfect offense, but they didn't turn the ball over, and they played it safe, and they were able to convert on third downs, and their defense shut down that Bengals offense, holding them only to 10 points. Impressive road win for New England. Was not expecting that. I was expecting Joe Burrow and the Bengals to get a Week 1 win, but unfortunately for them, the Week 1 woes continue. The September woes for the Bengals continue, and it's 3 years in a row of this, dude, from what I can tell, where they just have gotten off to a slow start, and it's just because the offense cannot produce. It's just getting ridiculous at this point. But we'll leave that game for where it is. After that, the Steelers beat the Falcons by the score of 18-10. There were no touchdowns scored by the Steelers in this game. It was all field goals, all special teams. But their defense played absolutely phenomenal. I mean, freaking TJ Watt was just
Oh my
a man
God.
amongst boys. Like that dude literally bullied the Falcons offensive line the entire game. Wrecked that game from beginning to end. Definitely one of the pass rushers, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Just an absolutely phenomenal performance in that game. After that, we'll talk about the Cardinals and the Bills. This was a shootout. Bills and the Cardinals, they went back at it the entire game. I think the Cardinals were up like 17-3 at one point. They definitely were doing a number on the Bills, but Josh Allen led that team with some new young receivers in the fold. Still was able to score 34 points at home, win that game by the score of 34-28. Kyler had a decent game, but I think Kev was telling me before we started recording, missed a touchdown pass to Marvin Harrison Jr. that could have potentially won them the game.
Wide open.
And unfortunately for them, they're going to have to deal with that memory looking at the film. They're probably looking at film on Monday, so obviously that's going to be a tough one to look back on. After that, this is actually a really good game between the Dolphins and the Jags. The Dolphins were down and out in this game, but they were able to make some huge plays. Tyreek Hill getting that electric, I think it was like an 80-yard touchdown that got them kind of back into the game. The Dolphins defense stepped up, and the Jags offense, who looked great in the first half, really couldn't get anything going in the second half. Only scored 17 points, and the Dolphins win on a game-winning field goal by the score of 20-17. The Seahawks and the Broncos. This was one of the later games in the afternoon. They won by the score of 26-20. This was also the debut of Bo Nix. Had some good moments, had some bad moments. Almost got his team back into a situation where they could have potentially won the game, but the Seahawks were able to close it down with a Tyler Lockett third down conversion late in the fourth quarter. Got them the win. They are 1-0. After that, the Chargers won the AFC West battle between themselves and the Raiders, winning by the score of 22-10. It was great to see J.K. Dobbins back in the fold, 100% healthy, and he tore up some big plays in this game. He's had a rough injury history in the NFL, but I just thought it was great to see him back in the fold and perform at a high level. The beatdown of the week, as far as I'm concerned, you can make a case that it was the Saints and the Panthers, but that Cowboys-Browns game was just an absolute beatdown. I know the score doesn't necessarily reflect it, but 33-17, the Cowboys basically owned the Browns the entire day. And Deshaun Watson, we don't know what his status is going to be moving forward as the Browns quarterback. There's already rumblings about whether or not that he should be the starting quarterback moving forward, and it's only week 1. And if he does not follow this up with a better performance, those calls will only grow louder. And then the last game of note is the 49ers and the Jets. I mean, we've been recording throughout that game. That game went final. The 49ers won 32-19. I wasn't able to catch any of this game. I could pull up the box score, but I mean, the 49ers did what they needed to do, beating what I would consider is a pretty solid defense in the Jets. Jets have a pretty solid defense, and
without Christian.
which was crazy. I got that notification right before the game, and obviously that hurt my fantasy team, but it was a good home win for them. You know, putting up 32 points against that defense is no joke, and it was nice to see Aaron Rodgers make it through a full game as a member of the Jets. That didn't happen last year, so we're off to at least a decent start with him in that regard. And that pretty much wraps it up as far as the sports side of the podcast goes. Like we said at the beginning, I think it would be appropriate to mention the passing of James Earl Jones. He died at the age of 93 on Monday. James Earl Jones is an icon in the movie industry. Obviously has played some major roles that everybody is just familiar with. Obviously one of them being the voice of Darth Vader in the Star Wars series. He's had multiple appearances in the Lion King series. I mean, you could just go down the list here. I mean, he's been such a huge, influential actor, not just of our generation, but of previous generations as well. And it was unfortunate to hear of his passing, but I have to say, you know, when you live 93 years, that is a life well lived, and he was able to make the most of it in his life. Kev, we could wrap up the episode with just some thoughts about James Earl Jones and the life that he lived.
I mean, obviously, when a celebrity of that magnitude passes away, Kyle and I obviously did not know him on a personal level, but when it comes to the impact he had to the movie industry, the animation industry, just kind of like even just in the voiceover industry, like he is somebody that when you heard his tone, when you heard that voice, you knew immediately this was going to be lit. Like this was somebody that in Hollywood was regarded as probably one of the greatest voice actors, if not the greatest voice actor of all time,
Hmm.
because of the amount of roles he played. And there was a wide variety, obviously outside of Darth Vader, he did Mufasa and he did a couple of other roles. I mean, he was in Coming to America. He played a pivotal role in that movie. There was a lot of things that he did to where
He was
it
in the
wasn't just
Sandlot.
one. He wasn't just in one type of movie. Like when you think of like Tom Cruise, you think like he's always in like an action movie or something. Like James Earl Jones was in a
Wide
wide
spectrum.
variety,
Wide
and
spectrum.
he
Yeah.
even he had a lot of stuff in front of him. So as a fan of his, as somebody who admired his work, it's obviously a sad day when someone like this passes away. But I mean, like Kyle said earlier, rest in peace to one of the greatest to ever do it. I hope him and his family are doing well. He lived a very long and vicarious life, or not vicarious, excuse me. He lived a very long and fruitful life, and I hope he's just he's happier and in a better place.
Yeah. When it comes to him, he's one of the very few people that is just universally recognized as a legend. And honestly, when it comes to James Earl Jones, that's always how I'll remember him. He's just an absolute legend in every sense of the word. And like you said, just being able to play multiple roles across multiple different genres of movies, it literally just a tip of the cap to the life of James Earl Jones. And obviously, it's sad when someone like him passes, but at the age of 93, like I think it's basically agreed amongst us both here. That is a life well lived, and it's going to be unfortunate that we won't see him uh, be cast in any more roles. But I mean, literally, the history speaks for itself. The movies that he's been a part of, the culture that he's shifted throughout his time has been significant. Is not really the right word to describe it. I mean, he has literally captured the hearts and minds of multiple generations, spanning back decades, and his impact will forever be felt because of that. So I think it was appropriate to at least, dedicate the last portion of our episode today to the passing of James Earl Jones. Like I said, died at the age of 93 and an absolute legend in the movie industry. But with that said,
100%.
that will wrap it up from our end. Hopefully, we improved a little bit from our last episode. I remember we were talking about our last episode. We were a little bit rusty, a little bit shaky at times. Felt like we did a little bit better today. So, made some steps in the right direction. And we hope that you guys enjoyed the episode, whether it was watching us. We'll eventually get back to posting the audio clips so that you guys can be able to hear it on the audio platforms as well. But we hope that you guys enjoyed the viewing experience in the episode. Kev, I got nothing more here. You can take us on home here, brother.
That's gonna wrap it up from us, guys. Obviously, Kyle and I said, we're gonna try to be bringing this back as often as we can. Expect more content. Expect more shorts on all platforms. Eventually, like you said, we'll figure out the audio thing. I know I'm probably locked out of that account because I can't remember my password, but neither here nor there. We'll figure it out. We'll power through it. But as always, thank you guys for all the support. We really do appreciate all the positivity that we've been receiving on social media. So we're gonna keep this going for as long as we can. Just keep rocking with us, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Yep. Take it easy, you guys.